Here's a question nobody really asks out loud. If someone told you that you'd have a full year's worth of savings built up 2 years from now, not by finding a new income stream, not by making some brilliant
Huh.
investment, not by selling anything, but just by adjusting one small thing you do with money every single week, would you believe them? Probably not. It sounds like the kind of promise that shows up in a pop-up ad at 2 a.m. But the math is real, and the rule is almost embarrassingly simple. It's called the $50 rule. And if you've never heard of it, that's actually the whole point. Let's start with a problem that most people don't think about in the right way. When people talk about saving money, the conversation almost always goes to the same place. Cut the subscriptions. Stop eating out. Automate your savings. Contribute to your 401k. Build a 6-month emergency fund. Good advice, all of it. But there's something underneath all of that advice that nobody quite addresses. The problem isn't that people don't know they should save. Almost everyone knows that. The problem is that saving feels like deprivation. It feels like you're taking money away from your present self and handing it to some future version of you that you can barely picture. And Present You does not love that deal. So what happens? People try to save big. They set ambitious goals. $500 a month starting January 1st. They stick to it for 2 or 3 months. Life happens. An unexpected bill shows up, or the budget just gets tight one week, and then they stop, and then they feel bad about stopping. And then saving money becomes associated with failure, which makes it even harder to start again. This cycle is one of the most predictable patterns in personal finance, not because people are bad with money, but because the way they're trying to save is fundamentally at odds with the way humans actually behave. The $50 rule is built around a different assumption. Instead of asking, how much can I save this month? It asks a smaller, quieter question. What if I just moved $50 somewhere it can't be easily touched, every single time I get paid? That's the whole thing. Let me put some numbers on this because the math is more powerful than it looks. If you get paid every 2 weeks, which is the most common pay schedule in the United States, you receive 26 paychecks per year. If you move $50 into a separate savings account every single paycheck, that's $1,300 in 12 months. Now let's say you're paid twice a month, 24 paychecks a year. That's $1,200. Weekly pay? 52 transfers. That's $2,600 in a year. None of those numbers are going to make anyone rich overnight. But here's the thing, depending on your monthly expenses, $1,200 to $2,600 might represent anywhere from 1 to several months of essential living costs. For many Americans living on a median household income, that $1,300 could represent a meaningful slice of a real emergency fund. And the rule doesn't stop at year 1. Year 2, you have somewhere between $2,400 and $5,200 saved, assuming you haven't touched it. Year 3, you're looking at $3,600 to $7,800. If your savings account is earning any interest at all, even a modest 4 or 5% in a high-yield savings account, those numbers creep upward a little more each year. None of this requires a raise. None of this requires cutting anything you love. None of this requires a complicated budget or a financial planner. Just $50. Every paycheck, without exception. Here's what makes this rule different from the usual save more money advice. It's not about the amount, it's about the behavior. Think about what $50 actually feels like coming out of a paycheck. If you earn $3,000 a month after taxes, $50 is less than 2% of your take-home pay. It's about what some people spend on a single meal out. It's a tank of gas. It's 3 or 4 streaming subscriptions you may or may not actually be using. For most people earning a stable income in the US, $50 per paycheck is genuinely below the threshold of pain. You don't feel it missing. You don't have to restructure your whole life around it. You don't have to skip the birthday dinner or tell your friends you can't go out this month. It flies under the radar. And that's exactly the point. The reason most savings efforts fail isn't a lack of willpower. It's that the amount being saved triggers a psychological reaction. It feels like a sacrifice. It disrupts your normal spending. And eventually, when life gets busy or stressful, you stop making the sacrifice and things drift back to normal. $50 is intentionally sized to avoid that reaction. It's small enough that your brain doesn't flag it as a threat to your lifestyle, but large enough that it actually accumulates into something real over time. Now, there's one part of this rule that matters just as much as the amount, and it's the word separate. The $50 doesn't go into your checking account where it mingles with your rent money and your grocery money and your bar tab. It goes into a completely separate savings account, ideally one that isn't attached to your debit card. ideally one at a different bank than your checking account, so you can't transfer it back in 3 seconds on your phone. This is called friction. And in personal finance, friction is your friend. The harder it is to access money, the more likely it is to stay where you put it. Not because you're irresponsible, but because the moments when you're most tempted to dip into savings are almost never genuine emergencies. They're usually moments of mild inconvenience or impulse. You want something. Your checking account looks a little lean. You think, I'll just borrow from savings and put it back later. If your savings account is right there, attached to the same login, one transfer away, you probably pull from it. A lot. And the accumulation effect of the $50 rule depends entirely on letting the money pile up without touching it. So when you set this up, and this is an implementation detail that matters, put the $50 somewhere with a little distance from your daily spending. A high-yield savings account at a separate online bank is ideal. Transfers take 1 or 2 business days instead of being instant, which gives your impulse time to pass. Let me walk you through what this actually looks like for a real person. Take someone named Marcus. He's 29, works in logistics, brings home about $2,800 per paycheck every 2 weeks. He doesn't have a particularly extravagant lifestyle. He pays rent, has a car payment, keeps up with his credit cards, goes out on weekends. Nothing crazy. But Marcus doesn't have much savings either. He never has. Not because he's reckless, he just never built the habit. At the end of every pay period, he looks at his account and there's not much left. He knows he should be saving more, but more feels impossibly vague. More than what? Starting from where? One day Marcus sets up an automatic transfer for $50, triggered on the day his paycheck hits. The money moves to a high-yield savings account at a different bank before he even has a chance to spend it. First month, barely notices, the checking account feels about the same. Life continues. 3 months in, $300 sitting in savings. It's not a lot, but Marcus realizes he's never had $300 that was just there. Not earmarked for anything, not waiting to cover a bill, just sitting. 6 months in, $650. Something shifts a little. Marcus has a minor car repair, $400. In the past, that would have gone on a credit card, added to the balance, cost him extra in interest. This time, he pulls it from savings and covers it. Done. The repair didn't derail his month. That's the invisible function of the $50 rule. It's not just building a savings number. It's building a buffer between your life and your credit cards. 1 year in, Marcus has $1,300 in savings. He also decides to bump the transfer to $75. Not because he has to, because he realizes he genuinely didn't miss the $50, so maybe he can handle a little more. And that's how the rule is supposed to evolve. Here's something worth understanding about why $50 works as a starting number, specifically. Behavioral research on savings habits consistently finds that people are much more likely to sustain a behavior when it starts small and builds gradually than when it starts large and demands consistency through willpower alone. There's a concept sometimes called commitment devices, tools you put in place in advance to make good behavior automatic rather than depending on yourself to make the right choice in the moment. Automating the $50 transfer is a commitment device. You make one decision to set up the automatic transfer, and then you don't have to keep making it. The saving happens whether you're motivated that day or not, whether work is rough, whether you're tired, whether you just got a parking ticket and your mood is terrible. The decision is already made. This is meaningfully different from manually transferring money into savings when you feel like it. If saving depends on a mood or a moment of motivation, you'll save inconsistently at best. If it's automatic, you save every single time. The discipline isn't in the willpower. It's in the setup. Now, what if $50 genuinely feels like too much right now? That's a real situation. If your income is very tight, if you're carrying high-interest debt, if you're a few $100s away from not being able to cover rent, $50 might not be the right number for you right now. Start with $20 or $10. The math changes, the timeline stretches, but the behavior is the same. You're building the habit of moving money before you spend it. You're building the muscle memory. You're proving to yourself that you can maintain it. Because here's the thing, the specific dollar amount matters less than the consistency. $20 a paycheck for 3 years is still $1,560. That's not nothing. And once you've sustained the habit for 6 months or a year, you'll likely find that the amount is much easier to increase. You've already demonstrated to yourself that you can function without that money in your checking account. Adding another $10 or $20 at that point feels much smaller than starting at a bigger number from zero. On the flip side, what if $50 feels very small? and you actually have room to save more aggressively. Then the $50 rule isn't your ceiling, it's your floor. Some people use this approach layered with other savings targets. The $50 automatic transfer is the non-negotiable baseline. It happens no matter what. Then on top of that, there's a separate effort to redirect additional savings when there's a good month, a bonus, a tax refund, or a period when expenses run light. The baseline stays firm. The top layer varies. And the baseline is the thing that compounds quietly over years, even through the months when the top layer doesn't happen. Think of it this way. If someone asked you to guarantee that you'd save $1,300 this year, no matter what happened, no matter how rough the months get, no matter how many unexpected expenses come up, could you do it? That's what the $50 rule on a biweekly schedule delivers, not as a goal you might hit if everything goes well, as a locked-in minimum. Let's talk about where this money should actually go, because a savings account is a little vague. For most people, the first priority is an emergency fund. The conventional recommendation, and this one actually holds up, is 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. That means rent or mortgage, groceries, utilities, transportation, insurance, and any minimum debt payments. For a lot of Americans, that's somewhere between $8,000 and $20,000, depending on where you live and what your life costs. That sounds like a massive number if you're starting from zero. But let's say your number is $12,000. At $1,300 a year from the $50 rule alone, you're at $12,000 in a little over 9 years. That sounds slow, but remember, that's the floor. If you're ever in a position to save more, you get there faster. And if you can't save more, you're still getting there, which is infinitely better than not getting there at all. And while it's building, even a partial emergency fund is doing something real. Having $2,000 in savings changes how you respond to unexpected expenses. Having $5,000 changes it even more. The fund doesn't have to be complete to start protecting you. If you already have a starter emergency fund, say $1,000 to $2,000, and you have high-interest debt, the question of where the $50 goes gets a little more complicated. In that case, some people split the approach. A portion of the automatic transfer goes to savings. Another portion goes toward aggressive debt paydown. The exact split depends on the interest rates you're carrying and your personal situation. But regardless of how you allocate it, the behavior stays the same. The transfer happens automatically, every paycheck, without needing a decision in the moment. Here's a moment to acknowledge something honestly. The $50 rule is not a path to extreme wealth. It's not going to put you in a position to retire at 40 or pay off your house in 5 years or become financially independent through savings alone. What it does is something more modest and more important. It protects you. The Federal Reserve has consistently found, through its annual survey of household economics and decision-making, that a large share of American adults would struggle to cover a $400 unexpected expense using cash or its equivalent. The specific numbers shift each year, but the pattern has been persistent. A meaningful portion of people, regardless of income, are operating without a real financial buffer. A $400 expense shouldn't be a crisis, but for a lot of people, it is. And when it becomes a crisis, it goes on a credit card. That credit card balance grows. Interest charges start compounding. What started as a car repair or a medical bill becomes a years-long debt that costs far more than the original amount. The $50 rule quietly prevents that, not by making you wealthy, but by making you stable, by building a layer between your daily spending and the kind of financial emergency that causes lasting damage. Stability is underrated in personal finance conversations. Everyone wants to talk about building wealth, growing investments, getting to 7 figures. But a huge number of people are one car problem or one medical bill away from a financial setback that sets them back years. Stability first, then growth. There's also a longer game here that doesn't get talked about enough. The most powerful thing the $50 rule does, beyond the money itself, is change your relationship with saving. Most people who don't save regularly have a complicated emotional relationship with the idea. Saving feels like deprivation. It feels like something you'll do someday. It feels like something that requires a specific income level you haven't hit yet, or a specific life stage you haven't reached. Retirement feels abstract. Emergency funds feel like a wish. The whole concept of saving feels like it belongs to a version of yourself that has it more together. When you sustain a $1.50 a paycheck habit for 12 months and look at the number in that account, something shifts. You realize, I'm a person who saves money. That's not a trivial thing. Identity is one of the strongest drivers of behavior. Once you see yourself as someone who saves consistently, even small amounts, it becomes much easier to increase the amount, to make harder financial choices, to resist lifestyle inflation, to say no to purchases that don't align with your actual priorities. The $50 isn't just a savings vehicle, it's proof that you can do it. And proof, especially early on, is worth more than the money. Let's talk about the moment when the rule gets tested. Because it will get tested. There will be a month when an unexpected expense comes up, and your checking account looks light, and you'll think about pausing the transfer. Just this 1 month, maybe 2. This is the moment the rule either holds or breaks. Here's a useful way to think about it. If a genuine emergency has come up, a real one, the kind that requires money you don't have, then pulling from your emergency savings is exactly what it's there for. That's the right call. You use the savings, you recover. You start rebuilding. But if the situation is more like, I spent a lot this month and I'd rather not have that $50 come out right now, that's not an emergency. That's your budget being a little tight. And pausing the transfer in that situation is the exact moment when the habit breaks. Because the next month, it'll be easy to pause it again. And the month after that, the $50 rule works precisely because it's non-negotiable. Not impossible to stop, but treated like a fixed expense. The way you treat rent, the way you treat your phone bill. If you can internalize it as a non-optional line item rather than something you do when it's convenient, the habit will hold. And if the habit holds, the money accumulates. And if the money accumulates, your financial life slowly becomes more stable, more secure, and more flexible than it was before. One final thought. There's a kind of financial advice that makes you feel like you're doing everything wrong. Like you should have started 5 years ago. Like your income is too low, or your spending is too high, or you made the wrong choices somewhere along the way. The $50 rule isn't that kind of advice. It starts where you are. It asks for almost nothing. It doesn't require a perfect budget or a high income or a detailed financial plan. It just asks you to move $50 somewhere safe every time you get paid. That's not a sacrifice. It's barely even a decision. But if you let it run for 2 years, for 5 years, for a decade, the quiet accumulation of a habit that's small can be the difference between being one bill away from a crisis and having actual financial ground to stand on. You set it up once, you don't think about it again. And slowly, without drama, without deprivation, without any of the things that usually make people quit, the number grows. That's the $50 rule. It's not exciting. It's not going to make a great cocktail party story, but it works. And in personal finance, working quietly over a long time is the whole game.